Alright people, you're probably thinking to yourself why I came up with this title. The whole thing is that in America, the educational system, the media is pretty much controlled by these globalist elites. And they're the same people who control Great Britain and they control America. They are the ones who control the dumbing down of the nation. There's nothing wrong with not knowing something, not having the knowledge in something, not being educated upon something, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but there's nothing worse than someone who has a lack of understanding and then hits out with something, you know, the type that's a know-it-all. It's important to say again that this is an individual I'm aiming at, and this is evident of the dumbing down of the country. I don't know how old this person was. This is the comment he put out. He said, "Look, I don't mean to rain on your parade, but the Scots had nothing to do with our independence." Well, I'll tell you something, not going to rain on my parade. He's not going to rain on my parade at all, simply because the fact I'm educated on it. I even read a book. It reverts back to this book on the Scottish Enlightenment, and this book by Arthur Herman was an American author and an American historian. Absolutely no Scottish blood, no Scottish heritage or nothing. He wrote about the Scottish influence on the American Revolution. He wrote about the Scottish people. The fact that he's written an entire chapter on it in his book, The Scottish Enlightenment, pretty much says it all. This one person, and it's sad to say that there's so many out there that have come across myself and have come out and said this. These people are clearly uneducated. He says, "Look, I don't mean to rain on your parade, but the Scots had nothing to do with our independence." He said the French, Spanish and the Dutch Republic helped us keep our independence after claiming it in July 4th, 1776. Okay then. So in 1776, or shall I say, on July 4th, that you celebrate every year, explain to me why you've got parades of those wearing kilts and playing the bagpipes. Oh, that's just something, you know, that's just nothing. And don't even try and deny it, because, you know, I could even look up YouTube videos and you'd see it. You see all these parades on Scottish, you know, you've even got a National Tartan Day, USA. Well, there's a reason why, because Scotland's had an enormous impact on America. In fact, no country on this entire planet Earth has had a bigger impact on the United States of America than Scotland has. Not even the Spanish that you just sat and named there, not even the French who you just sat and named there. You do realise that the French Revolution happened because they looked up to Scotland for influence. That's where the French got their inspiration from. That's where the French gained their influence from on the French Revolution. They looked up to the Scots. That's where they gained their influence from. He says the Scots had nothing to do with our independence. In 1717, the Highland clearances happened. More than 2 million Scots were fled off their land and slaved off to different continents on the planet. In other words, 2 million Scots would have been sent over to America, but over a 200-year period. In other words, this Highland clearances starting in 1717 would have finished in about the early 1900s. You would have had the Scottish Borderers, which is nothing at all to do with the Highland clearances. The Scottish Borderers were bribed to go over to fight for Northern Ireland and settled in a place called Londonderry, where they fought to defend Derry's walls. and I've stated this before. These Scottish people, Scottish borderers, became known by the American natives as Scotch-Irish. They were Presbyterians. That's who they were. They weren't Irish. They were only Irish by geography. So basically, after the English were moved into Northern Ireland, the Scots were forced to leave Northern Ireland behind, to go abroad, to go over and settle in America. Unfortunately, the Scots and the Native American Indian people didn't see eye to eye with each other. That's only natural, you know. I can understand the natives are going to fight for their, you know, their land. It's, you know, it's perfectly understandable. The Scots had basically settled in Boston and many other parts, and apparently the Scots hadn't felt safe without having at least moved twice, something to do with the crops running dry. So what happened, you had the Scots had spread and fought and colonised the entire south. This was before 1776. The entire south practically became Scottish. That was before 1776, that was long before the French and all the rest of them came about. It was Scotland who laid the foundations of America, of the United States of America. Oh yes, it was. If you don't believe me, you can even look up the name John Muir. Pretty sure that's the name. John Muir. You even get parks named after him. Even nature trails named after him. He laid the foundations of the culture. Yes, there are many different cultures in America, we understand that. But as America as a nation, it was Scotland that laid the foundations for all the rest of them to come in. Before the Scots, of course, you had the Spanish who colonised America. And it was a Scot who basically founded the Chilean Navy. In doing so, in founding the Chilean Navy, that Scot gave the South Americans their independence from the Spanish colonies. And of course you had the Portuguese who colonised Brazil. So I more than understand about the Spanish, right? The Scots were in America long before the likes of the Dutch and the French. The Scottish people, by the Native American Indian people, were called the Scotch-Irish. That was their nickname. They were Presbyterians. The name redneck, hillbillies and crackers was given to the Scottish people by the Americans. That's what they called our people. Redneck basically meant that they were Scottish covenants of, covenants of the Scottish Presbyterian Church, because they wore the red stiff collar. That's why they were called rednecks, because they were Scottish Presbyterians, covenants of the Scottish Presbyterian Church. The second one, they were called crackers because they were loud, brash talkers, and it derived from the ancient Gaelic or Gallic word crake, meaning talk. Any good crake today, meaning any good talk today. That's where the name crackers derived from. Then you had hillbillies. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, I know that one. That one is basically where the people who lived in the mountains and hills. No, that's only half the answer. The other half of the answer is actually the fact that the hillbillies were people who were loyalist supporters of King Billy, Prince William of Orange, the Dutch King III, who led them to war and battle against the Republic of Ireland, defending Derry's walls. I'm not going to touch upon all the rest of that. There's both sides where the Republicans of Ireland would pretty much feel there was a wrong to that, and then you've got the side of Ulster where they feel it was, you know, they've got their side of the whole story on the battle and everything. I'm not touching upon that. The rednecks, the hillbillies and crackers were Scottish people. That's who the cowboys were. You've no doubt seen all the films, you've seen the culture, you've seen everything to do with the cowboys and Indians. You've seen it all, plastered all over your country, plastered all over, you know, certain media and stuff. Cowboys and Indians. The cowboys were the Scottish people. That's who the Scottish people were. And if you want evidence of that, then when they say they were fixing to go somewhere, that's actually Scottish dialect. So is the word yella for yellow. And I can give you another example, critter for creature. That's another part of Scottish dialect. You see, these wee things that you wouldn't have actually have noticed. That's, you know, that's just the foundations of it. Another word, naked. N-E-K-K-I-D, naked for naked. That's what they would have said, you know. And another example, a prime example and evidence that these cowboys were Scottish. They said the word gived instead of gave. You see, proper English is the word gave. You know, he gave him that. Well, the southern, you know, these cowboys, these rednecks, hillbillies and crackers said gived. He gived them that. He gived. Well, we say gied, which is slang for gived. That's Scottish. So that's basically who the cowboys were. They were Scottish people. They were the Presbyterian people of the Protestant Church. That is why 100 years later, from the Scots settling in America, you had the formation of the Ku Klux Klan, the Rednecks, the Hillbillies, the Crackers, who formed the Ku Klux Klan, right? You had said here, and as far as fighting for the South, you're now talking about the American Civil War 100 years later, not the American Revolutionary War, and that and the South lost their right to make slaves of man by the North. You are only partially correct. You're only partially correct because yes, the Scots had fought in this American Civil War, right? There's no argument of that. The Ku Klux Klan, but I'm going to get to my point here. The Scots settling in 1717, and even before then, with the Ulster Scots, the Scotch Irish, and then your Highlanders that came over from the Highland clearances. You know, think about it. They settled in early 1700s, yet 100 years later, the Ku Klux Klan staunchly hated Catholic people. That didn't just come from nowhere. It just goes to show you that in a 100-year period, they still remained Scottish. That shows you how much of an influence that remained in a 100-year period. The United States of America is a 240-year-old country or whatever. I'll give you another example. The Pictish people, the Pictish heritage is still strong throughout Scotland today, and which can be found in the Grampians in Tyneside, which is round about Dundee region, and Strathclyde. The Pictish heritage in Scotland is very strong to this day. So we're no different today than what we were back then when we fought the Romans for 500 years. Right? These Scottish people who fought the Romans for 500 years and remained unconquered and free, who were known as the Picts at that time. 1,000 years later, that's right, I'm not even talking about 1717 to 1776, I'm talking about Pictish times 1,000 years later to about the 1300s. You know, a 1,000 year difference between the Romans, when our people fought the Romans, to a time when William Wallace and Robert the Bruce gave rise to Scotland. Right? You're talking a 1,000 year period here. And yet, what was the difference between the Picts, whose heritage is still very strong throughout Scotland today and can be proven by our blood genetics? That just shows you something. A 1,000 year period. What was the difference between the Picts, who massacred the 9th Legion of Rome, to William Wallace and Robert the Bruce and the Scots that defeated the English on battlefield